The twin suns of Viridia Prime hung low in the rust-colored sky, casting long, wavering shadows across the cracked streets of Dusthaven, a ramshackle town clinging to the edge of the great scorched basin like lichen to bone. Heat shimmered off the sand-packed roads, warping the outlines of prefab huts and rusted hoverbikes parked haphazardly outside bars with names like The Thirsty Void and Sandblind Saloon. Captain Joran Vale adjusted the collar of his worn coalition uniform, the insignia long since faded to ghostly outlines. He'd been stationed at Outpost Theta 7 for 6 months, far from the galactic core, far from anything that felt like home. His boots crunched over gravel as he walked, dust coating every seam of his gear, his mind heavy with the dull ache of isolation and the memory of a battle 3 systems over that still haunted his sleep. Then he saw her, curled beneath the overhang of a fried noodle stall. Half hidden behind a stack of empty plasma canisters, sat the tiniest creature he'd ever seen. She couldn't have been more than knee-high to him, her body slight and trembling slightly even in the oppressive heat. Her skin was a soft, luminous violet, the color of twilight just before true dark, and her hair, long, fine, and impossibly white, spilled over her shoulders like spun moonlight. She wore tattered robes stitched from what looked like salvaged thermal blankets, and her enormous eyes, the color of polished amber, followed every passerby with a mixture of hope and deep, quiet fear. No one stopped. No one even glanced twice. In Dusthaven, survival was a solo act, and compassion was a luxury no one could afford. Joran slowed. He'd seen plenty of strays in his tours across the frontier, orphans of war, refugees of collapsed colonies, but something about this little one snagged at him. Maybe it was the way she hugged her knees to her chest, as if trying to disappear. Maybe it was the faint tremor in her hands, or the way her stomach growled loud enough for him to hear over the distant hum of a passing sand skiff. He remembered his little sister back on Terran for how she'd looked just like that during the food riots when they were kids. Scared, hungry, waiting for someone to care. Without thinking, Joran stepped into the noodle stall and ordered 2 protein wraps. Extra spice, extra sauce, the way his squad used to tease him for liking it. The vendor, a grizzled Krell with 3 eyes and a cybernetic jaw, handed them over with a grunt and a raised eyebrow. Joran paid without a word, then walked over to the alley. The girl flinched as his shadow fell over her, scrambling backward until her spine hit the metal wall. "It's okay," he said, crouching slowly so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice was rough from disuse, but he kept it gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." He held out one of the wraps, the steam still curling faintly from the foil. "You look like you could use this." For a long moment, she just stared at the food, then up at his face, her amber eyes wide and searching. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out. Her fingers were slender, tipped with nails like opals, and they trembled as they took the wrap. She didn't say thank you. Maybe she didn't know the words, but the way her whole body relaxed, just a fraction, spoke volumes. She unwrapped it carefully, as if it were something precious, and took a small, tentative bite. Then another, and another. Soon she was eating like she hadn't seen food in days, which, Joran suspected, was probably true. He stayed crouched there, eating his own wrap in silence, giving her space. When she finished, she licked her fingers clean and looked up at him again, a flicker of something like wonder in her gaze. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." Her voice was like wind through chimes, soft, clear, and slightly musical. "Lyra," he repeated, testing the name. Suited her. "I'm Joran." She nodded once, then looked down at her empty hands, suddenly shy again. Joran stood, brushing dust from his knees. He thought about offering her a place at the outpost, just temporary, just until they could find her people. But Dusthaven wasn't kind to strays, and the Coalition didn't exactly have orphan programs for alien children. He sighed. "You be careful tonight, Lyra. Dusthaven's not safe after dark." She didn't answer, just watched him walk away, her white hair catching the last golden rays of sunset. That night, as Joran sat alone in his cramped quarters at Outpost Theta 7, staring at the flickering holoscreen that displayed nothing but static interference from the planet's magnetic storms, he heard a soft knock at his door. He frowned. No one visited him. Not out here. He opened it, hand instinctively drifting toward his sidearm, and found himself staring down at Lyra again. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood three figures, tall and regal, their violet skin glowing faintly in the dim corridor light, their white hair flowing like liquid silver down their backs. They wore robes of deep indigo embroidered with constellations in shimmering thread, and their eyes, amber like Lyra's, held a gravity that made Joran feel like he'd just stepped into the presence of royalty. The tallest of them stepped forward, her bearing calm but commanding. "You are Joran Vale," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. It wasn't a question. "I am," he replied, heart pounding despite himself. "You fed my daughter today," she continued, glancing down at Lyra, who clung to her robe with small, reverent hands. "In a place where kindness is rare, you showed her mercy." Joran blinked. "Your daughter," the woman nodded. "I am Empress Silva of the Lumari sovereignty. These are my sisters, Commander Viral and Scholar Mareth." She gestured to the other two, who inclined their heads in solemn greeting. "Our vessel was damaged during an ambush by Void Reavers near the Helix Nebula. We crash-landed in the basin 3 cycles ago. Lyra was separated from us in the chaos. We searched every settlement, every scrapyard, but Dust Haven is a maze of shadows." Her voice tightened, just slightly, betraying the fear beneath her calm. "We thought we'd lost her." Joran glanced down at Lyra, who looked up at him with eyes full of trust. He hadn't just bought a sandwich, he'd reunited a family. Before he could respond, Silva extended a hand toward the corridor. "Our starship is hidden in the dunes beyond the salt flats. We would be honored if you would join us tonight as our guest. Not just as thanks, but as family." Joran hesitated. A Lumari starship? He'd heard stories of their bioluminescent vessels, their gravity-defying architecture, their warriors who could move faster than thought. But they were notoriously reclusive, rarely interacting with off-worlders. And now they were inviting him aboard? Still, he looked at Lyra one more time, the way she tugged gently on his sleeve, her silent plea unmistakable, and he nodded. "I'd be honored." The journey to the ship was surreal. Silva led him through winding alleys and over dunes that shifted like living things, her sisters flanking them like silent guardians. The air grew cooler, the twin moons rising like watchful sentinels overhead. Then, cresting a ridge of black sand, Joran saw it. A vessel unlike anything he'd ever imagined. It wasn't made of metal, but of what looked like living crystal, pulsing with soft violet light, its surface swirling with patterns that shifted like stars being born. Vines of silver energy curled along its hull, and the air around it hummed with a low, soothing frequency. "This is the Star Weaver," Silva said, pride warming her voice. "She has carried our lineage for 7 generations." Inside, the ship was even more breathtaking. The walls glowed with inner light, corridors curving organically like the inside of a seashell. Plants with bioluminescent leaves grew from alcoves, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like night-blooming jasmine. Lyra ran ahead, laughing for the first time, her tiny feet silent on the smooth floor. They led Joran to a grand chamber at the ship's heart, a circular room with a domed ceiling that mirrored the night sky above, complete with swirling galaxies and drifting comets. A table of polished obsidian stood in the center, laden with dishes that shimmered like liquid rainbows. Fruits that changed color as you touched them, bread that floated 2 inches above the plate, and a steaming broth that smelled of spices he couldn't name but somehow felt familiar, like childhood. "Please," Silva said, gesturing to a seat carved from what looked like solidified starlight. "Eat. You are among friends." Joran sat, still dazed, and took a hesitant bite of the floating bread. Tasted like sunlight and honey. Laughter bubbled up in him. Disbelief, joy, the sheer absurd wonder of it all. He told them about his life in the Coalition, about Outpost Theta 7, about the sandwich stall. Lyra listened with wide eyes, interrupting occasionally with questions in her chiming voice. "Do all humans carry weapons? Why is your hair so short? Do you dream in color?" Silva watched him with quiet intensity, her gaze thoughtful. "You carry sorrow," she said suddenly, not unkindly. "I see it in the way you hold your shoulders, in the shadow behind your eyes." Joran's smile faded. He hadn't realized how transparent he was. "Yeah," he admitted. "Lost a lot of good people in the Helios campaign. Sometimes, I wonder if I deserved to be the one who made it." Silva reached across the table, her slender fingers brushing his wrist. Her touch was cool, calming. "Survival is not a crime, Joran Vale. It is a responsibility. Those you carry with you, they live on through your choices, through your kindness." She glanced at Lyra, who was now showing him how to make a fruit peel itself with a flick of her fingers. "You chose kindness today. That is a legacy worth honoring." Just then, alarms blared through the ship, a sharp, melodic wail that somehow felt both urgent and beautiful. Silva stood instantly, her expression shifting from warmth to steel. "Void Reavers," she said, her voice tight. "They've tracked us." The room lights dimmed to a deep indigo, and the ceiling display shifted to show 3 jagged, black ships descending through the atmosphere, their hulls bristling with weapons. Joran's military instincts kicked in. "How many?" 20 raiders," Viral said, already strapping on a gauntlet that crackled with violet energy. "They'll be here in minutes." Joran stood, pushing back his chair. "I'm not sitting this out." Silva studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you fight with us. Not as a guest, but as one of ours." What followed was chaos and poetry woven together. The Starweaver's defenses activated shields of shimmering light, turrets that fired beams of condensed starlight. Joran found himself beside Viral on the command deck, barking coordinates into a comms unit that translated his words into the Lumari tongue. Below, on the dunes, raiders in black armor poured from drop pods, their weapons firing plasma bolts that sizzled against the ship's shields. "Lyra's safe," Mareth assured him, her hands flying over a holographic console. "She's in the core chamber, shielded, hidden." Joran returned fire with his pulse rifle, each shot precise, trained from years of combat. But the Reavers were relentless, swarming the ship like insects. Then, disaster. A plasma blast struck the shield generator. The lights flickered. A breach opened in the lower hull. "We have to evacuate," Viral shouted. "No," Silva said, her voice ringing with authority. "We finish this." She turned to Joran. "There's a failsafe in the engine core. If we overload it just right, the shockwave will disable their ships without destroying ours. But someone has to manually trigger it from inside the core chamber." "It's suicide," Viral protested. "I'll do it," Joran said before anyone else could. Silva's eyes locked with his. In that moment he saw not just gratitude, but something deeper, respect. Maybe even the beginning of something more. "The path is dangerous," she warned. "I've walked worse," he said, and meant it. The journey to the core was a nightmare of sparking wires, collapsing corridors, and reavers at every turn. Joran fought with everything he had, his body moving on instinct, his mind sharp with purpose. He thought of Lyra's smile, of Silva's quiet strength, of the taste of that floating bread. He thought of all the times he'd felt alone, and how, in one day, he'd found something worth protecting. He reached the core, a cavernous chamber filled with a swirling orb of violet energy, pulsing like a living heart. The failsafe was a crystal node on the far side, guarded by a collapsing bridge. Joran ran, leaping over gaps, ducking under falling debris. A reaver appeared at the entrance, weapon raised, but before he could fire, a bolt of violet energy struck him from behind. Joran turned to see Silva standing there, her gauntlet smoking, her eyes blazing. "I told you," she said, joining him on the bridge. "You're one of ours now." Together they reached the node. Joran slammed his hand onto it. The core flared, light flooding the chamber, brighter than 1,000 suns. The explosion never came. Instead, the energy surged outward in a silent pulse, washing over the Reavers' ships like a wave. Their engines fizzled out. Their weapons went dark. One by one, the black vessels dropped to the sand, inert. Silence fell over the dunes. Joran and Silva stood in the core chamber, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat and something like triumph. Later, back in the sky chamber, the ship humming peacefully beneath them, Lyra ran into Joran's arms, her tiny body trembling with relief. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," he promised, holding her close. Silva approached, her expression softer now, the steel replaced by something warmer. "You saved us," she said. "Not just our ship, our future." Joran looked from her to Lyra, then out the viewport at the endless stars. He thought of Outpost Theta 7, of the lonely nights and the static-filled screens. He thought of sandwiches and alleyways and the way a single act of kindness could ripple across galaxies. "I didn't save you," he said quietly. "You saved me." Silva smiled then, a real, radiant smile that lit up her violet skin like dawn breaking over a new world. She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then let us save each other," she said. And as the Starweaver lifted gracefully from the dunes, leaving Dust Haven and its ghosts behind, Joran knew he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something bigger. A family woven from starlight and sand, from courage and compassion, from a shared future among the stars. Outside, the twin moons of Viridia Prime watched in silent blessing as the ship ascended, its violet glow merging with the endless tapestry of the cosmos, carrying with it a human man, an empress, her sisters, and a little girl who'd once been alone beneath a noodle stall, but never would be again. The Starweaver soared through the upper atmosphere of Viridia Prime, its crystalline hull singing softly as it pierced the veil between planet and void. Inside, peace settled like a warm blanket, until it didn't. 3 days after the battle with the Void Reavers, while Joran was learning to weave starlight threads with Scholar Mareth in the ship's arboretum, a room where plants bloomed in response to emotion, he felt it, a tremor too precise to be mechanical. The ship shuddered, not from engine strain, but from something far more sinister. Alarms didn't blare this time. Instead, the lights dimmed to a deep, anxious crimson, and the walls emitted a low, mournful hum. Silva appeared at the doorway, her face pale even beneath her violet skin. "The core is unstable," she said, voice tight. "Not from damage, from sabotage." Joran's blood ran cold. "The Reavers." "No," Viral growled, striding in behind her, gauntlet already activated. "They were just scouts. Someone planted a quantum parasite in our core during the breach, something that feeds on energy and corrupts the ship's neural matrix. It's rewriting her instincts." Maretha's fingers flew over a floating diagnostic orb. "It's mimicking our ancestral code," she whispered. "It's making the Starweaver believe we're the enemy." Before anyone could react, the floor beneath them shifted. The corridor walls sealed shut. Gravity inverted for a terrifying second, sending Joran crashing into the ceiling before righting itself. "She's trying to eject us," Silva realized, horror dawning in her eyes. "The ship thinks we're intruders." They raced to the command nexus, dodging automated defense vines that lashed out like whips. In the central chamber, Lyra stood frozen before the main console, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She won't listen to me," the girl sobbed. "She says I'm not real." Joran knelt beside her. "What do you mean, not real?" Lyra looked up, her amber eyes wide with terror. "She says, I was never born." A chilling silence followed. Silva staggered as if struck. "Impossible," she breathed. "Lyra is my blood, my daughter." But Maretha's face had gone ashen. She pulled up a hidden archive, a genetic ledger sealed since the sovereignty's founding. "There's a record here," she said, voice trembling. "A failed gestation pod from the Helix Nebula crash. The original Lyra didn't survive." Joran's stomach dropped. "Then who?" "I don't know," Lyra whispered, clutching Joran's arm. "I remember waking up in the dunes, alone. But I remember you, Joran. I remember Mother's voice. I remember the taste of starfruit from our garden on Lum Era." Silva reached out, cupping Lyra's face. "You feel real to me." "Feelings can be implanted," Viral said grimly. The parasite doesn't just corrupt systems, it rewrites memories. It creates illusions to lure us into traps. Joran refused to believe it. He'd seen the truth in Lyra's eyes when she ate that sandwich. Hunger wasn't faked. Hope wasn't programmed. There's another explanation, he insisted. Then the ship spoke. Not through speakers, but directly into their minds. In a voice that sounded eerily like Silva's, but hollow, distorted. You are contaminated. You will be purged. The floor beneath them dissolved into shimmering energy. They fell not down, but inward, into the ship's memory core. A vast, shifting labyrinth of light and shadow where every corridor was made of forgotten moments. Here time bent. Joran saw himself as a boy on Terran 4, holding his sister's hand during the riots. He saw Lyra as an infant, wrapped in star silk, cooing in Silva's arms. He saw battles he'd never fought, planets he'd never visited, and then something else. A cloaked figure, standing at the edge of a black nebula, placing a small, glowing seed into the wreckage of the Starweaver after the crash. The architect, Mareth gasped, recognizing the symbol on the figure's cloak. A spiral within an eye. They've been hunting Lumari genetic lines for centuries. They believe our DNA holds the key to rewriting reality itself. Joran turned to Silva. They didn't just sabotage your ship. They tried to replace your daughter. But why would they give her memories? Viral demanded. Because a perfect mimic needs love to be believable, Mareth said softly. If Lyra believed she was real, so would we. Lyra sank to her knees, shaking. Am I a weapon? Joran pulled her into his arms. You're Lyra. That's all that matters. Then the walls of memory began to collapse. The parasite was erasing them, starting with Lyra. Her edges grew translucent, her form flickering like a dying star. No! Silva screamed. She thrust her hands into the core's energy stream, blood, luminescent violet, dripping from her palms. Take my life thread. Anchor her to it. The ship hesitated. The architect's programming warred with the raw, unfiltered truth of a mother's love. Joran did the only thing he could think of. He pulled out his coalition dog tags, the only thing he carried from his old life, and pressed them into Lyra's hand. You're real because you matter to someone, he said fiercely. And you matter to me. In that moment, something shifted. The core pulsed gold. The parasite shrieked. A sound that wasn't sound, but a tearing in the fabric of thought, and shattered into harmless dust. The Starweaver sighed, her lights returning to soft violet. The corridors reformed. Gravity stabilized. And Lyra stood whole again, solid, breathing, her amber eyes glistening with tears of relief. But their victory was short-lived. On the view screen, a new signal appeared. Not Reaver ships, not coalition cruisers, but a single vessel of obsidian black, shaped like a closed fist. The architect's personal warship, the Oblivion Maw. They know we're awake, Viral said. Silva turned to Joran, her expression resolved. There's a place beyond the Veil of Whispers. A sanctuary the sovereignty hid eons ago. No one knows its location except the ship herself. But to reach it, we must fly through the Singe Rift, a storm of antimatter that eats hulls and minds alike. Joran met her gaze. Then we fly. As the Starweaver leapt into hyperspace, Lyra curled up beside Joran in the observation blister, watching stars blur into streaks of light. Do you think I'm still me? She asked quietly. Joran ruffled her white hair. You're more you than most people ever get to be. Days passed. The ship healed. Joran trained with Viral, learning to channel energy through Lumari gauntlets. Mareth taught him the old songs that calm stellar storms. And Silva. She walked with him often in the memory gardens, their conversations drifting from strategy to dreams to the way Terran rain smelled after a dry spell. One night, as they stood beneath a holographic sky showing Earth's constellations, Silva took his hand. If we survive this, she said, I would ask you to stay, not as a soldier, not as a guest, but as Lyra's father, as mine. Joran's heart hammered. He thought of his empty bunk at Outpost Theta 7, of the years spent waiting for a purpose. He looked at her. this empress with stars in her veins and kindness in her bones, and knew he'd found it. "I already have," he said. Then the alarm screamed. The Singe rift loomed ahead, a churning maelstrom of purple-black energy, lightning made of broken time, and waiting at its heart, the Oblivion Maw, its weapons charged, its docking claws extended like fangs. The architect's voice echoed through comms, cold and infinite. "Return the anomaly, or be unmade." Silva gripped the command throne. "We don't surrender children." Joran took his place at tactical, pulse rifle replaced by a starlight cannon. "We don't surrender families." The Starweaver dove into the storm. Lightning lashed the hull. Reality frayed at the edges. Time looped. Joran saw himself die 100 ways, saw Lyra fade again, saw Silva turn to ash. But each time, he fought back, anchored by one truth. Love was not an illusion. It was the one thing the architect could never replicate. In the heart of the rift, the Oblivion Maw opened fire. But the Starweaver did something unexpected. She sang. A harmonic resonance, built from every memory aboard, Joran's laughter, Lyra's first word, Silva's lullabies, Viral's battle cries, Maretha's equations. The song tore through the architect's shields like paper. For the first time, the cloaked figure appeared on screen, tall, faceless, draped in shadow. "You defy logic," it hissed. "No," Joran said, locking targeting systems. "We defy you." He fired. The blast didn't destroy the Oblivion Maw. It unraveled it, thread by thread, memory by stolen memory, until nothing remained but a single drifting seed. Lyra reached out with the ship's tractor beam and caught it. "Should we destroy it?" Viral asked. Lyra looked at Joran, then at Silva. "No," she said. "Let's heal it." And so they did. Weeks later, the Starweaver emerged from the Veil of Whispers into a hidden system where twin suns bathed crystalline planets in golden light. Here, the Lumari sanctuary waited. Floating gardens, singing rivers, cities built inside living trees. The Lumari people, long thought extinct, welcomed them with tears and music. Among them was an elder who took one look at Lyra and gasped. "The seed of continuance," she whispered. "It was never a child, it was a vessel, a repository for our lost lineage. The crash activated it, and your love gave it a soul." Lyra wasn't a replacement. She was a resurrection. Years flowed like starlight. Joran never returned to the Coalition. He became captain of the Sky Guard, protector of the sanctuary. He and Silva married beneath the twin suns, their vows witnessed by galaxies. Lyra grew into a brilliant navigator, her white hair now braided with threads of starlight, her laughter echoing through the ship that once doubted her. They had children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, each with violet skin, white hair, and their father's stubborn kindness. Joran taught them to shoot, to sing, to share their last sandwich with a stranger. And on quiet nights, when the children slept and the sanctuary glowed soft beneath alien stars, Joran and Silva would walk hand in hand through the memory gardens, past the spot where a dog tag still hung from a luminous vine. A reminder that sometimes, the smallest act of kindness could rebuild a world. Far away, in the silent dark, the last seed of the architect drifted, now blooming with tiny white petals, learning, slowly, what it meant to be real. Time wove its gentle magic through the sanctuary system, stitching peace into every sunrise and laughter into every breeze that danced through the crystalline canopies. The scars of war on ships, on souls, on worlds, slowly faded beneath the steady rhythm of life reborn. Joran, once a lone soldier counting days in a dusty outpost, now walked paths lined with starlit blossoms, his boots scuffed not by battle, but by chasing his youngest daughter through fields of singing grass. He and Silva built a home not of stone or steel, but of living wood and light, nestled in the heart of the largest floating island in the sanctuary. Its walls bloomed with memory vines that shimmered when touched by joy, and its windows opened not just to skies, but to views of distant galaxies they'd once feared but now called neighbors. Every morning, Joran rose before dawn to train the new generation of Skyguard, Lumari youths and human volunteers alike, teaching them not just how to fight but when not to, Strength protects, he'd say, but wisdom chooses what's worth protecting. Lyra, now a young woman with the grace of a diplomat and the spark of a pioneer, piloted the Starweaver on peaceful missions, delivering medicine to remote colonies, rescuing stranded travelers, and once, famously, negotiating a truce between two warring asteroid clans over a disputed moonberry grove. She never forgot the alley beneath the noodle stall, and because of it, she founded the First Bite Initiative, ensuring no child in the sanctuary, or beyond, ever went to sleep hungry. When asked why she did it, she'd simply smile and say, "Because someone once saw me." Silva ruled not from a throne, but from a garden table, where matters of state were discussed over shared meals and cups of nectar tea brewed from flowers that only bloomed under twin moons. Her wisdom became legend across 3 sectors, but at home, she was simply mother. The one who mended torn robes, soothed nightmares with lullabies older than stars, and always saved the last slice of honey-crust bread for Joran. Their children carried the best of both worlds, the fierce loyalty of Terran resilience and the deep empathy of Lumari grace. Their eldest son, Chiron, followed Joran into the Sky Guard. Their twin daughters, Mela and Sira, became stellar botanists, coaxing life from barren worlds. Little Torin, the baby with his father's crooked grin and his mother's amber eyes, dreamed of becoming a chef who could cook meals that healed hearts as well as bodies. On the anniversary of the day Joran bought that sandwich, the entire sanctuary celebrated Kinship Day. Markets overflowed with music, food, and stories. That evening, under a sky painted violet and gold by the twin suns' descent, the family gathered on their terrace. Lyra brought out a basket from the old Dusthaven stall, now preserved as a relic of hope, and inside lay not protein wraps, but golden moon bread filled with spiced fruit, baked by Torin himself. Joran took Silva's hand, her violet skin warm against his, her white hair catching the last light like spun silver. He looked at Lyra, laughing as she tried to teach Mela how to make fruit peel itself, at Chiron arm wrestling Viral, and losing, as always, at Mareth showing Sira how to read star charts in the ripples of a floating pond. He thought of the lonely man he'd been, haunted by ghosts and gravel roads, convinced his story was already written in blood and static. And now he was surrounded by love so vast it rivaled the cosmos itself. Silva leaned her head on his shoulder. "You once asked if you deserved to survive," she murmured. "Look around you, my heart. This is your answer." Joran smiled, pulling her closer. "No," he said softly. "This is our beginning." Far above, the Starweaver drifted in gentle orbit, her crystal hull pulsing like a contented heartbeat. The architect's seed, now a small, flowering shrub in their garden, bloomed with soft white petals that released tiny, harmless sparks of light every time someone told a kind word nearby. And in that moment, as laughter rose like music and the stars blinked awake one by one, Joran Vale knew with absolute certainty. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Not a soldier lost in the sands, but a father, a husband, a guardian of joy home at last, in a family stitched together by kindness, forged in fire, and blessed with a future as bright as the heart of a newborn son. And they lived, not just happily, but wholly, deeply, and forever, among the stars they'd saved, and who, in turn, had saved them back.